Hey Wargamers, welcome back to the channel, Death from Above Wargaming. I'm Aaron, coming back with another great mech review of an iconic chassis, the Shadowhawk. Now, every time we field one of these guys in a bat rep, there's always comments about how everybody loves this mech, one of my favorites. You know, it's great, it's iconic design, etc. And I gotta tell you, I'm absolutely in love with the new sculpt in the game of Armored Combat set, which of course you can get over at our sponsor, Ares Games and Minis, for an excellent price. So guys, check them out if you haven't already. So the Shadowhawk, we're going to be looking at two excellent variants here. The first one's our bread and butter, the 2H. And when I say excellent, I don't really mean excellent, because the 2H, it reminds me of the Assassin. In fact, it shares 75% of its weapons with the Assassin. SRM2, LRM5, medium laser, super weird combo, and then it's got an AC5 on top of that. So that helps round it out a little bit, but it's got, again, two weapons with minimum range, two weapons that are short range, kind of a hodgepodge. It does have jump jets on there, so not bad. But again, not one of my favorite mechs. But then you introduce the LosTech, right? And this thing basically gets taken by Earthworks, I believe, and they produce a new ground-up build of the Shadowhawk for House Marek. This is the 5M. Now the 5M is pretty interesting. It's got an LRM20 in place of that LRM5, an Ultra AC5, a Streak SRM2, and then a trusty medium laser. Also get some other goodies there, courtesy of the weight-saving gear. So, how's it going to stack up? I don't know. It is substantially more expensive though. The 5M is about 350, 360 more BV. So, is it worth it? Is it going to do the damage? Let's find out, guys. Stick around. Don't go away. Alright guys, here we are, the Shadowhawk. So we're going to start out with the Shadowhawk 2H. This is the bread and butter Shadowhawk. This is the one that you see in all the artwork, right? Firing that goofy head-mounted SRM2. This is a great mech in terms of the lore. I mean, it's in all the books. Produced all the way back in the Age of War in 2550 and persists all the way through. This particular variant persists and is in use basically until the end of BattleTech time, back beyond 3150. So pretty neat. Let's talk about the technical specs. So battle value 1064. It has a movement profile of 5'8" on the ground, which is really good. It can claim that +2 target mod. And it has a jump capability of just 3, so sort of unique in that the jump capability doesn't match the same the walk speed there, but still has a little bit of extra mobility, which is useful. Heat dissipation of 12, all standard components, including a standard fusion engine, and 82.2% armor coverage. That is 152 points at 9.5 tons. So if we look at the armor diagram in the center there, looking real good, pretty nice distribution. It is a little bit light on the legs, but again, I think I would personally rather have that, especially for the hit probabilities. I think I'd rather have that in the arms and the torsos protecting my ammo, and this mech, it has a lot. So again, it's got 3 ammo dependent weapons, an LRM5, an AC5, an SRM2, and of course it's got that medium laser for backup as well. But it needs 3 different types of ammunition. It's got the AC5 ammo in the left torso, the SRM2 ammo in the CT, and then that LRM ammo in the right torso. So this thing is not lightly equipped in terms of ammunition. Makes it a little tough to survive, but we'll see how it shakes out in the benchmarks. But before we get there, let's take a look at the next one, the 5M. Also 55 tons, inner sphere medium, has a battle value of 1430. Now this guy was produced in 3048, as we talked about in the intro, so this was a real specific upgrade, right on the cusp of the clan invasion, really, with that Helm memory core technology. But this thing phased out pretty quickly. 50 years later, according to Master Unit List, that's it. No more Shadowhawk 5M. So not sure if that's totally accurate or not. I mean, I'm sure there were a few floating around, but in terms of being in strong circulation, this thing really didn't last that long. So what's interesting here? Well, it's got 585, so it's got a little bit extra in terms of jump capability courtesy of the XL Fusion engine and Endosteel internal structure. And also on the heat dissipation side, we're looking at 20. It can dissipate 20 points of heat in a single turn, which is a lot. And it needs it, and I'll show you why in just a minute. Let's talk about the armor. So this gets a nice bump, 10.5 tons for 168 points of armor. That's 90.8%. And you can see here in the armor diagram in the middle, it closes the gap on the legs, so it throws some armor on those legs. Arms are at 100%, and the torso section is very nicely armored as well. So this one's packing an LRM 20, although what I found really interesting is that it only has 1 ton of ammo. If you're going to do that, guys, and you're designing a mech, I mean, just put the LRM 15 on and get the 8 shots. I mean, 6 shots is like almost negligible. You're going to run out of that very quickly. So, I mean, I guess the point is you're firing, and then by the time you're in range of any serious return fire and damage, your ammo hopper is dry. But I don't know, it was really weird to see that. Ultra Autocannon 5, it's got a ton of ammo. So 20 shots is not bad. Again, if you are rapid firing this thing and firing 2 rounds every turn, you're going to run dry pretty quick, but that's still 10 game turns. That's a pretty long time. It's got that same old medium laser and then a streak SRM in the head, which is not too bad. 1 ton of ammo on the Streak SRM, a ton of ammo, as we talked about on the UAC and the LRM. Also, case in the left torso, and only in the left torso. I don't know. They only cost half a ton. It has the crit slots available for it. I think if I were building this thing, if I were the CEO of Earthworks, I would have went with an LRM 15 and put case everywhere. I don't know. But hey, this thing still has some pretty nasty damage potential, so excited to see how that shakes out. Let's check that out right now, actually. Okay, so here we are on the offensive benchmark side. So our baseline benchmark, I don't know. I'm underwhelmed. These look very similar to the Phoenix Hawk numbers, to be honest with you. Both the 1D and 3D, respectively, compared to the 2H and the 5M. I was expecting a lot more out of the 5M, and you can see on the back end of the damage curve, it definitely eclipses the 2H. Again, it's got that AC5 that's firing twice as much. It's got that LRM 20. But then, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, oh, there goes the damage, right? All your damage falls off because you run out of ammo and you're basically down to, an AC5, and I don't know. So very interesting. The other great thing about these mechs is they're oversunk, right? There's way too many heat sinks on the chassis. I couldn't build up heat if I tried. I think if you jump and fire everything, you still don't build up any heat. Maybe you build up a couple points. I don't remember exactly. I did look at it, but it's negligible. I don't understand why there are so many heat sinks on these chassis. So interestingly designed in that regard. So, what you'll see is the baseline, the red line, the optimized damage. It's all the same. There's really nothing that I could have done with these chassis. And it was really interesting, especially on the 5M. I was hoping for so much more there. But, alas, such is life. Let's check out the lethality. Maybe there's something there. Okay, so now we see a little bit of differentiation. So that 5M, definitely a little bit more lethal than the 2H. But, again, I got the Phoenix Hawk Comparo that we just did on my mind. And I can't help but realize that the Phoenix Hawk 3D just blows the 5M out of the water in terms of lethality. And also damage for that matter. But regardless, the 5M compared to the 2D, the 5M doing much better, right? And I think it is that early LRM fire that will wear the target down and give you the opportunity to get those late game kills. When we look at the damage per hit, the critical hits, the time to kill, very similar until you get down to time to kill. The Shadowhawk 2D, I think the only mech that's possibly worse than this one is the Assassin. But yeah, 19.2, that's a long time to wait to kill a Javelin, especially from a 55-ton mech. So a little bit disappointing there. A little bit better on the 5M. Like average is around 10 to 12 turns. So 13.7, it's still below average, but it's not so abysmal that I want to throw up in my mouth. It's just, again, it's just disappointing because you see that Ultra Autocannon, you see that LRM 20. Like, I'm just expecting so much more damage out of this thing, but just can't seem to connect. And really, you know, when we come down to it, the 2H only killed that javelin in this lethality benchmark 10.9% of the time. The 5M only killed it 35.1% of the time. So not so great. But maybe on the defensive side, let's take a look. All right, not bad. Not bad at all. So, you know, survivability on these mechs looking pretty decent. 76.1% on the 2H, 78.7, just slightly better on the 5M. And again, you know, we're talking about the addition of case. We're talking about an extra ton of armor on the 5M. So that does make sense to me. What are the big killers here? Well, you know, I'm surprised to say that ammo is not a higher probability than it is, and I think that's probably because it's spread out all over the place. So let's dive into that, right? So when we look at the ammo deaths on the 2H, that is the largest contributor, by the way, to deaths, more so than just getting cored out or your head blown off, at 15.5%. But frankly, for carrying 3 tons of onboard ammo in 3 different locations, I was expecting more. But those crits are pretty well padded out. You know, on the left torso, it's like 20% chance for the, you know, for a hit. On the right torso, I think it's a little over 25%. And then the CT, you know, very low percent chance to hit ammo there. Again, you've got all those other critical slots, you know, padding that out. And then on the 5M, it's, you know, it's pretty even across the board. Actually, engine deaths from that XL engine really taking up the bulk of the kills there at 8.5%. But even still, that's not bad. And it's, you know, courtesy of, I guess, all that torso armor and the high speed. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think that these mechs are, you know, pretty tough for what you got. I was actually expecting them to be far worse with all that ammo on board. So pleasantly surprised by these numbers. Makes me think about, you know, how I would use them in a fight, considering the offensive capabilities are a little lackluster. But this gives me a little bit of hope for these 2 mechs. Mobility. So really good. I love 5.8 mechs. The ability to get that, you know, that +3 when you're running, and just you know, that +2 very easily when you're walking. I think that's great. That's definitely a something that is desirable for me. You know, that 2d6 probability curve that I talk about all the time, I mean, it's real. And so that extra point on the target number it can make a huge difference, right? Trying to hit a 9 versus a 10 or an 8 versus a 9, I mean, these are big differences. So I think anything where you can get into that 5.8 range is great. The jump jets make it all that juicier. The 5M doing a little bit better there because it's actually got 5 MP on the jump versus just 3. So when we look at the target mod degradation, the 5M naturally does a little bit better because of that, especially, you know, when we look at the fact that they have the exact same survivability curve for the most part. You really get a nice side-by-side here. So then you can see, right, 2.6 at the end of the day versus 2.2 for the 2H. When we look at the motive hits, you can see also the 2H suffering a little bit more there, about 0.3 more motive hits per game. And again, if you remember way back at the beginning of this, we talked about the low armor on the legs of that 2H, and you really see the difference here, because when it comes down to the critical slots in the legs, they're the same. All the jump jets are in the torsos. You know, motive criticals, all of you know, again, higher on the 2H because of that. Really not much more to say there. So both of these mechs very fast, very mobile. Both can jump, but the 5M, you know, is gonna edge out the 2H in terms of this test. All right, here we are, the efficiency analysis. I'm a little depressed about these mechs. Such high hopes for the Shadowhawk. My high hopes dashed. So let's look at the effectiveness benchmark. So again, this is taking that survivability, which is half decent on these mechs, and it's combining it with that very pitiful damage output that these things can produce. Now, what you would expect is on the back half of this, you know, you can see the survivability holds close to or at 100% for several turns. So the damage is really unaffected until you start getting into closer ranges there. The 5M did more damage in that back end because of that LRM-20. So it's really capitalizing on that here. And the 2H is getting a little more penalized because more of its damage was done at close range, and both of them suffer there from, that's where their survivability starts to sort of bleed off. Damage loss overall, though, was really good. So I don't know if you remember when we talked about the Phoenix Hawk, they were at, I believe, in the 20% range for damage loss, and I had commented that was a little bit high. This is really where you want it to be. 10.4% on the 2H, 6.9% on the 5M. That's very low. So really good there. If only we could optimize these mechs, if they had less heat sinks and more weapons, or just better weapons. I'm not sure which. We could do something with this, right? But at the end of the day, you just simply can't. And so those numbers, the damage loss numbers, really are the net loss over baseline. And that's just kind of what you're left with. Now, we look at the efficiency rating. The efficiency rating, again, we're calculating basically damage per battle value, so to speak. And the Shadowhawk 2H ranked at a 4.47 in our efficiency rating. The Shadowhawk 5M, 4.79. So was hoping for more. I will tell you that both of these mechs below average for what you pay for. I mean, I know the mobility is great and the toughness is there, but man, I was just hoping for more. I will tell you, coming off our sort of string of Alpha Strike games, this mech performs in Alpha Strike. The inefficiencies and deficiencies that we see in Classic don't necessarily translate in Alpha Strike, and you sort of get a mech that is more akin to what you read about in the books, right? Where it is sort of tough and versatile, and it can do lots of damage. It's sort of a staple, medium mech. In Classic, I mean, it's really, again, I love the way the mech looks, and I want it to be better. But these variants, it's like a dumpster fire, in my opinion. And it's like, again, it's that assassin syndrome where you've got this mix of like really wacky weapons. Half of them have a minimum range, the other half don't even come into range until 9 inches. It's like, what are you supposed to do with this thing? And that just makes it tough to play from a Classic perspective. But at the end of the day, gunnery sensitivity, it's mediocre, 0.5 and 0.595, nothing really great there. I would not put really good pilots in these mechs. There's really not enough damage on the back end to warrant high gunnery. I think this is a great candidate when you need to stuff like a regular, like a skill 4 or skill 3 type guy into a mech, or girl, whatever. Whatever you desire to put into this mech, you can certainly do that. So on the gunnery 3, gunnery 4 side really is where I think I would play both of these mechs. All right, starting with the 2H, looking at threat by range. So 0 heat ACD, that's in white again. That's the damage you can do building up 0 heat. Maximum ACD, this is our average calculated damage when we build up as much heat as possible. In this particular mech, in the 5M as well, those numbers are identical because, again, you can't build up any heat. So our peak 0 heat ACD, 11 points, that comes in at 6 inches. That is where this mech is basically most effective. Also, it is where the peak ACD would be if it could build up heat. The peak Alpha Strike is only 19 damage. That's if everything hits, all your missiles hit. I don't know. Like a Jenner F does more damage from an Alpha Strike. And I think incidentally costs about the same, 1032 or 1011, 1011 I think is what the JR7F costs, and will actually do more. Now granted, it doesn't have the back end and the range that the 2H has, but interesting point of comparison. So again, this mech builds up no heat, and when you look at its threat envelope, it's okay. It only has one arm-mounted weapon there. Mostly everything else, head, torso. So, that medium laser can hit a little bit in that right side arc, but otherwise, that's kind of where we're at. So when I think about roles for this mech, I struggled. It's like a bench warmer. I'm not I'm not really sure. But if I had to play this mech, the two roles I would play it is in a cavalry role, and in that cavalry role, this mech is basically blazing across the battlefield at full speed, using those jump jets to avoid obstacles, firing that LRM and that AC as it closes, and then once it gets within 9 to 6 to 5, like that range. It's bringing those other weapons to bear. And I guess you kind of wanted the sweet spot for this mech, really is that 6-inch mark, where that LRM isn't so far into the minimum range. The AC is still functional. So really that's where you want to keep this mech. Also a skirmisher. So it can be super annoying. It's fast. And again, if you can keep it, at decent range, that AC5, the LRM5, you kind of move in and out. You can use it to cap or even threaten objectives that are on the flank. I mean, it's big enough that, people are going to want to bring attention to it. You can't just leave a 55-ton mech, unattended. So in that regard, it could play that sort of flanking, skirmishing role pretty well. And if things do take the bait and they close with it, again, it's got that medium, it's got that SRM2, so it can hopefully hold its own against most mechs. But those would be the two roles that I would play this mech in. But honestly, the 2H... not really one I think I would ever field personally in my force unless I had to. Let's see if the 5M tells a different story. All right, so this looks a little bit better. Now remember, the threat analysis is not a benchmark, so it doesn't take into account like real-time ammunition usage. It doesn't look at turnover, turn heat. It's just showing you point in time, if you were at this range, what damage could you do. And I think this threat analysis is potentially a little bit skewed because it's got one LRM-20 launcher with 6 shots in it. So, those can be expended fairly quickly. But, if you manage to get into closer ranges, so on and so forth, I mean, it can alpha and it can bring some serious firepower to bear. And if it had another ton of ammo, or like I mentioned before, like an LRM-15 with 2 tons or something along those lines, I think you would see more sustained damage over time. So anyway, where are we at here? Well, our peak zero heat ACD on this mech is 20.3. That's also at 6 inches, incidentally. That's really the sweet spot for both of these Shadowhawks. But the Alpha Strike is 39 points of damage at 9 inches. That's pretty good. Now that's like what I would expect out of a 55-ton mech. It's a solid punch. I mean, it's still not great, but, hey, like, it's a heck of a lot better than 19. So, this one, you can actually, if you save your ammo, you're smart about your use, you can really unload on something and, really blow it to pieces, especially if it's picking on smaller mechs. Against a larger, an assault, a heavy, may not do much, especially considering that peak alpha damage is assuming, you hit with 20 SRMs. Which, it can happen, right? But it's less likely. So, at the end of the day here, the threat envelope looks very similar. Only one arm-mounted weapon. It's a medium laser. Everything else on that torso. So you got to be careful if things get behind you. This mech, again, very highly maneuverable. So hopefully that doesn't happen. I think you can use positioning to your advantage here based on the speed and the jump capability. In terms of roles for this mech, cavalry, skirmisher, for the exact same reasons I listed for the 2H. However, I would also say this mech could probably serve as a second line mech. You can keep it in the back. You can, fire that LRM-20, let the bigger mechs close in. Fire that LRM-20, take good opportunity shots with that Ultra AC. And by that I mean, wait for a good target number. Don't try to like peg the flea or the locust with a +4 target mod at long range and just, run your hopper dry. Like, use the mech intelligently, and I think you can lay down some pretty good damage. And when your LRM's dry, that's when you close this mech in, and it can close that gap pretty quickly. Again, it's got that 8 on the running speed, and it's got 5 MP on the jump side, so it should be able to close the gap at a decent clip. 1 or 2 turns, you should be able to bring all your weapons to play. And if the enemy's tied up with other mechs, this guy should be able to run around and get some pretty solid hits in. And that's really it. I mean, there's not much else to say about these two mechs. Again, personally, I was hoping for a little bit more. This mech review, personally, makes me appreciate Alpha Strike and the abstraction, because in Classic, I mean, these mechs, I don't see how they would really perform well on the table at all. But again, in Alpha Strike, you get a little bit more out of these mechs. So maybe we'll do some Battlytics. We'll have another add-on screen for some Battlytics for Alpha Strike down the road. We'll see about that. But as far as this particular review, guys, we're wrapped up. So leave your comments. Tell me why you're mad at me for saying your beloved Shadowhawk sucks. I'm bummed out too. I was really hoping for more. But let me know what you think about it. Other than that, as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for supporting the channel. If you haven't already, please subscribe. It's important to us. Also, check out our sponsor, Ares Games and Minis. You can get yourself, as I mentioned, a delightful new Shadowhawk. He actually sometimes has the new sculpts from the box set, the Game of Armored Combat. He has the individual minis in stock sometimes for sale. So if you just want to grab a Shadowhawk or two extra and not play these particular variants, or just play them in Alpha Strike. But if you do want to get the Shadowhawk, check that out. Other than that, guys, I'm done making jokes about the Shadowhawk. Have a great night. Stay tuned. Always more stuff coming from Death from Above Wargaming.